People, as he calls it, is part of a racist system that he condemns today. The first thing he denounces is the quota of arrest imposed on U.S. police in many large cities. This race for numbers pushes them to stop black people for no reason.
Quotas lead to arrests for no reason. Minorities have no one to call if they're wrongly arrested. The white person will call their local political committee man or person. They'll call the parents, perhaps, of a teenager, will call the local politician.
Yo, what's going on here? My child was arrested just because he didn't have his license. Why don't you just tell him to go home and get his license?
And things like, so the white person has more power. Black people have no connection to the people in power. So you know there's not going to be any blowback on arresting a minority because they don't have any power to complain.
And African Americans are not only unjustly arrested, they are not treated with the same respect as white people are.
If you stop somebody from going through a light, you would say, hey, out of your car. Out of your car. Show me ID. You wouldn't say that. To a white person, you would go up and say, may I see your driver's license, please? And blacks know that. Blacks know when you go up and say, hey, out of your car, now. And then they say, whoa, what did I do? Oh, what did I do? Don't say that. Don't ask me why I'm stopping you. I said get out of the car. And that's right there, you first disrespect. And I saw that happening, and blacks know it's happening. They know it's not happening to white people. So automatically they start resenting the police just from little verbal commands, let alone the physicality of grabbing somebody and putting them in handcuffs while you check their ID. Unfortunately, when I would tell other officers, whoa, that's enough. Then they would think, hey, what are you? N for the word. What are you, an N lover?
Since he retired, he campaigns openly against the racist behavior of the police. The former officer has even made a very explicit sign.
I'm asking police, end open season. Stop shooting black men just like they're some kind of animal.
Black folks, I've been trying to tell y'all for the longest time to get some firearms, get some training, learn a martial art, get in shape. You look at what happened to Jordan Neely, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, so many other people. You have to really consider that we are at war. We are being treated worse than prisoners of war. The United Nations right now is in 6 U.S. cities to come and lecture us about our police officers that are violating the United Nations Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials for host nation UN countries. You have police officers in Antioch and in California, all over the state, who are racist. You have robot police dogs on the streets right now. You have people choking us out on freaking subways right now. You have women who are not being shown grace. Go ask Breonna Taylor about how much mercy a black woman will be shown right about now. Get some power tools. Get ready or get a goodwill. Those are your only choices.
Enforcement comes to mind. It should be protecting its citizens, but often it does the very opposite. We're talking about racist killings by the US police, deadly police brutality, and it disproportionately affects people of color. You may remember George Floyd. He was a black man unjustly killed by a white police officer in 2020. There were massive protests, a movement called Black Lives Matter. But racism remains rampant in the United States of America, and now the United Nations has intervened. A team of UN human rights experts is touring the US to ensure accountability and justice. Here's a report.
The United Nations is saying that the United States and its law enforcement is no different, essentially, than any other brutal regime, brutal dictatorship. You may live in a so-called democracy, but the way your law enforcement behaves, it appalls even the UN. They're calling them out now. And if you don't know, the UN currently is in 6 different U.S. cities, including Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, and others, to discuss police brutality and actually take citizen testimony about police brutality, specifically towards black people and others. Now, don't get me wrong, and others. But that shows you, Joe Biden and U.S. government, that your race soldiers, a.k.a. U.S. law enforcement, is trash. When the world has noticed this much, they are trash. Do something with your race soldiers.
In popular science today on racism and police brutality, 1 in every 1,000 black men in the U.S. will be killed by law enforcement, according to a 2019 study. Police brutality is the 6th leading cause of death for black men aged 25 to 29. And the EMT response to Tyree Nichols's beating and death by police is a good example. It took them 19 minutes to provide, to get a stretcher to take Tyree to the hospital after arriving at the scene. When they get to the scene, EMTs often just take the word of the police. They go to the police first instead of the victim, the person that's actually hurt and needs medical care. And then police brutality and the constant presence of police and the danger of brutality makes black communities, people in communities, less trusting of medical experts and the whole system. Raises blood pressure, creates high blood pressure, creates all sorts of problems for black communities. Check it out. Also learn more about systemic racism in police in the U.S. Check out our website.
Civilian military force in Florida that he, not the Pentagon, would control.
We also want to make sure that we have the flexibility and the ability needed to respond to events in our state in the most effective way possible. And some of that will require us to be able to have access and be able to use support in ways that are not encumbered by the federal government or don't require federal government. So I'm going to be recommending in the budget $3.5 million to reestablish the Florida State Guard.
Another DeSantis idea.
All praises and glory to Yahweh. Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Ha Rakat Kwadash. Double honors to our apostle elders, which rule great millstone well. And shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel. May you endure into the end. Shalom wa abba baba. All right, so you just saw how, it's pretty much obvious that we're in a race war. All right, the so-called white man is a red Edomite. Biblical name is Edom. They are the wicked. All right, the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indians are the biblical Hebrew Israelites. All right, and this devil, the so-called white man, has a perpetual hate for the Israelite. Excuse me. Now, you just heard the governor of Florida, which made it illegal to be an undocumented immigrant in Florida. Now he's talking about pretty much initiating the Florida, he called it the Florida State Guard. And when you look up the races of the Florida State Guard, it shows you all these things here. Look, 144 is the time. Kala Yaba Shimya Shai Mashapayim Kal Adawamium. May Yahweh Bashimya Shai judge all these Edomites and the heathen, the Goyim, all right? Abba Ball, send evil on Babylon. Now it says, state Florida prison guards openly tout associations with white supremacist groups to intimidate inmates and black colleagues, a persistent practice that often goes unpunished according to allegations in public documents and interviews with a dozen inmates and current and former employees of the nation's third largest prison system. Excuse me. White supremacist prison guards work with impunity in Florida. So, as it says, establishing Florida State Guard won't give DeSantis a private army free of federal control. But you would have a racist group, all right, patrolling the streets on top of the police against the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian. All right? And that's what DeSantis is a racist Edomite. All right? It says, in practice, state defense forces tend to be small. So it'd be a militia is really what it is. And militias were built to fight slaves that would run away. Auxiliary forces trained in specialized areas. Let's look this word up. I'm going to pull it up in a different page.
Auxiliary.
It says giving assistance or support, helping, acting as a subsidiary, supplementary, held in, or used as reserve. All right, here you go. Slave patrol. It says slave patrols, also known as patrollers, paddy rollers, or paddy rollers, were organized groups of armed men who monitored and enforced discipline upon slaves in the antebellum U.S. southern states like Florida. In fact, let's go ahead and Florida, see it? It says the slave patrol's function was to police slaves, especially those who escaped or were viewed as defiant. They also formed river patrols to prevent escape by boat. All right? It says slave patrols first began in South Carolina in 1704 and spread throughout the 13 colonies, lasting well beyond the American Revolution. As colonizers enslaved more Africans, which they weren't Africans, they were Israelites that were in Africa. And the population of enslaved people in South Carolina grew, especially with the invention of the cotton gin. So did the colonizer fear of slave uprisings. And that's what they're afraid of right now. They're afraid of uprisings of the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian, which I played a video with Dave Hodges, right, the host of Common Sense Show, also Alex Jones, and they're talking about they're afraid of these Jake coming in to America and coming across an Israelite camp, all right, and they're afraid that when they learn the truth, that they're going to act out with violence towards the so-called white man. All right, because you got the cartel, which are heavily armed. They're being armed by your own government. All right, your government is the boogeyman. The United States government is the boogeyman to the world. They're the terrorists. They're the ones that put guns in Jake's hand in Chicago. They're the ones that put the guns in the cartel's hand. All right? They're always trying to look for, someone to blame so that they could find themselves innocent. It says they developed slave patrols, and this is where your police officers came from, right? The police officer literally branched off of slave patrols. And now this is a new form of slave patrol. The Florida State Guard is a slave patrol. It says the developed slave patrols when other means of slave control failed to quell enslaved people's resistance. Their biggest concern was how to keep enslaved people on the plantations. And that's what they're crying about in Florida right now, is that when they made it illegal and that it's a felony to be an illegal, all the immigrants ran, which were mostly Northern Kingdom Jake. You even had Southern, like the Haitian, all right, or even the West Indian, all right, but they fled, all right? And so they're creating this slave patrol, all right? It says Their biggest concern was how to keep enslaved people on the plantations, being held against their will, since that is where enslaved populations were highest initially, right? But now throughout the whole North and South America, you got Jake enslaved under the so-called white man. It says, initially, slave owners offered incentives to the non-slave owning whites, such as tobacco and money. And what are they offering them people? Money. To urge them to be more vigilant in the capture of runaway slaves. When this approach failed, slave patrols were formally established. See? There you go. State militia as patrollers. That's what you have, the Federal State Guard. It's a state militia as patrollers. All right? Slave owners feared gatherings held by enslaved people, which they're afraid of us gathering and learning this truth. All right? It says that in the Bible. It says, as we stand upon our feet, great fear fell upon them. Revelation 11. And after 3 days and a half, so in 1969, the spirit of life from Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai entered into them, starting with Abba Bivens. And they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. So that's what's happening right now. And that's why they're making it illegal to be an immigrant, all right, undocumented immigrant, as well as they're starting their slave patrols, their militias. They're bringing their militias to slaughter Jake, because we're in a race war, all right? The Lord said this would happen. Yahushua himself said this is part of the end. Matthew 24, verse 3, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? I'm going to jump down and it says, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So race wars, world wars, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. All right, let's see what that says in the NLT. It says, nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Let's see what the ESV, there's NIV. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Same thing. All right, let's go into the word. Let's see what that word nation means there. It says nation, ethnos. Ethnos, a multitude, whether of men or of beasts, associated or living together. Look, a multitude of individuals of the same nature or genius. The human family, a tribe, nation, people, group. All right, so that's what they're going against. They're going against the Israelite nation, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, which have been scattered throughout the world of slavery. All right? Now going back to this article, it says, slave owners feared gatherings held by enslaved people would allow them to trade or steal goods, which who's the biggest thief? Who stole the land? Who stole the people? The so-called white man. But see, they count themselves innocent and blame us. They say, we're the monster. We're the thief. Right? But they're the thief. They're the murderer. They're the rapist. They're the sicko. And had the potential of organizing a revolt or rebellion. So what are they going to do? They're going to persecute us. Right? It says in verse 9, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And this is why, because they don't want us gathering together. So they're going to create these militias, which are already in existence. All right, racist militias are already in existence, funded by the government, armed by the government to kill so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, which are the biblical Hebrew Israelites, because we are in slavery under the so-called white men. Now, going back to this article about DeSantis, right, forming this racist militia, it says, in practice, state defense forces tend to be small militias, auxiliary forces trained in specialized areas such as search and rescue operations and used to support their state's National Guard. The defense force DeSantis has in mind is no exception. He is calling for a force of 200 volunteers and asking for $3.5 million, which these crackers, they want to kill Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. All right? So they're going to volunteer. You're going to have more than 200 volunteers begging for a chance to shoot a so-called black man or a so-called Hispanic man or a so-called Native American Indian man. It says, and asking for $3.5 million from the state legislator to train and equip them. See, they're going to arm them to kill you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indian. And even if you are legal, you think they're going to see the difference? You know, they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. All right, there's a comedy with Cheech from Cheech and Chong, and it's called Born in East LA, which he just gets picked up looking like a Mexican from Mexico, but he's born in East LA, you know, and they send him back to Mexico thinking he was an immigrant, but he's an American citizen, and that's true. That's why it's comedy, because it's true, you know, that they don't give a shit what you look like, all right? If you look like a so-called Mexican from Mexico, you're an enemy to the state, all right, to this so-called white supremacy of America, all right? And that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a race war between the Israelite and the Edomite. At the same time, the Edomites are going to have a civil war. And then there's going to be a war in heaven and a world war, which is going to be a nuclear war, and this is a war that will end all wars. It says, the Florida National Guard, by contrast, consists of nearly 12,000 military personnel, employees an additional 450 civilians, and receives more than $454 million in federal funds and about $18 million in state funding annually. There is thus little risk of a state defense force serving as a significant counterweight to the federally regulated National Guard, nor could it somehow replace the Guard, which they're not intending that. All right? What they're doing is they're creating these 200 men to guard a certain area, a certain zip code. All right? And their target is going to be colored. All right? If you're a so-called black man, so-called brown man, so-called Native American Indian man, or in that land you got Reuben, the Seminole Indian. All right? It says, states cannot disband their National Guard without the president's consent, but she never said that, or even reduce their guard strength below the minimum set by the president. And he never said that. They're adding, all right? They're adding to their arsenal, okay, to go to war with the Israelite. See, here's another racist move by this red devil, and you can see the redness in his skin next to his white collar. All right, Esau Edom, the red man, which they call themselves so-called white. All right, they're the red devil the Bible speaks of. It says DeSantis defends blocking African American Studies course in Florida schools. So if he wanted to put 200 men on the street to protect your communities, why would he be stopping you from learning your own history? Which it's not even true history, they lie to you. But the point is, why would they be blocking African American studies course in Florida schools, because their plan is to wipe you off the face of the earth. All right, just like you'd wipe shit off an ass, they're planning on wiping the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian off the white man's ass. But the so-called white man is going to be wiped right off the face of the fucking earth. All right? By Yahweh Shai. Yahweh Shai is a so-called black man. The Messiah that is spoken of in the Holy Scriptures, he's going to fight for us. All right? And he's going to wipe this piece of shit, the so-called white man, right off the ass of the earth. All right? Let me grab Genesis 49, which it tells you there's going to be a race war. In verse 1, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. All right? So going with Judah, it says Judah, which is the African American, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise, thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. All right, so that's where it's going to go. Who's his enemy? His enemy is that so-called white man. And there's going to be violence between the so-called black man, Judah, the so-called Negro, and the other 12 tribes against the so-called white man. All right? Which he's the so-called white man, the red devil, he has the world in his pocket. You got to remember, the United States sits at the head of the United Nations. All right? Which they're confederate against the Israelite. It says, Judah is a lion's whelp. So let me finish that. It says, thy father's sons shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp. So Judah, the so-called Negro, is very strong, a very powerful people. And they're going to fucking destroy Esau. Right? They're going to rip this motherfucker a new one. It says, from the prey, who's the prey? Esau, Edom, the weaker one. The so-called white man is the weak person, all right? That's why they need the gun. Without a gun, they're nothing, okay? That's why they fight to keep that gun in their hand. Because without that gun, there'd be nothing stopping us from fucking taking the head off of them. It says, from the prey, my son, thou art gone up. So you're hiding from your prey when you're a strong lion. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? Who's going to rouse up the Negro? The so-called white man, which I just showed you videos of that. Let me get it.
I've been trying to tell y'all for the longest time to get some firearms, get some training, learn a martial art, get in shape. You look at what happened to Jordan Neely, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, so many other people. You have to really consider that we are at war.
All right. So who's going to rouse him up? The so-called white man's rousing him up. All right. Another one is for Gad, the North American Indian. It says in verse 19, Gad, the North American Indian, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Right? So he's going to get payback on these crackers too. All the 12 tribes. They're all going to get payback. All right? That's what it says in Revelation 13, 10. I'm going to go 10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And this is dealing with the Israelites, all right? We're waiting for this day, all right? We're longing for this day so where we could get payback. But we know that it's not going to come by the gun. The gun is not our blessing. The gun is Esau's blessing. That's how he conquered the world. We're waiting on Yahweh Ba'Hasham Yahushai, which they're going to avenge us. This is Revelation 13, verse 7. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, which is dealing with that so-called white race. They sit at the head of the UN, and They're killing so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. All right, because you can see here, they're doing the same thing to the so-called Latino, all right, as they do to the so-called Negro. It says 8-year-old girl dies, an 8-year-old girl in Texas dies in the U.S. Border Patrol custody. Immigrant kids keep dying in CBP detention centers. See? They're just going up. They're just killing our people. 22 immigrants died in ICE detention centers during the past 2 years, and that's what they tell you. All right? So they show a hate towards the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian. All right?
Talk about Texas real quick, because they are literally putting forth a bill that reads almost like the one in Florida, where, everything's a felony if you're an undocumented immigrant. With this law, everything's going to make you into a felon. So if you're a DACA recipient and your parents are, not completely legal yet, you can't receive DACA. That would make them felons, and because you're associated with a felon, you lose your status. Employers won't be able to hire undocumented workers, so job sites and all sorts of stuff are going.
But they got these little immigrant kids working in the McDonald's right here in Colorado, in Loveland, Colorado, which is majority of so-called white people. Right? You have immigrant children working the McDonald's. So we are still slaves today under the so-called white men, subject to payment.
Suffer because of that. Again, transporters and delivery drivers, you might have a license and be on the path to citizenship, but if you're going through Texas, you will become a felon. But they're not done there yet either. They are literally trying to push forth another bill that would make vigilante death squads. Now,
just like Florida. All right? So you are in a race war.
I know that sounds crazy, but it's not. It's really legitimately true. Now, in the bill, it says, yes, some of these people will be armed officers. Some. The rest of them will be people who just feel the need to go out and protect their borders and protect their homeland. Literally giving them partial immunity to, do what they have to do, essentially. Basically,
they're going to be, like it says, death squads for the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian, which have been scattered throughout the world in slavery. All right? They're pretty much the target for this so-called white man's gun.
Giving citizens to operate outside the confines of Border Patrol, the local police departments, and National Guard.
Which I just showed you, those are all racist organizations.
It's sad to think that the whole Republican philosophy right now is who can outdo who at being the biggest jackass.
So as it says in Jeremiah 16:16, behold, I will send for many fishers, but you have the prophets, and they're fishing for the elect. Saith Yahweh, they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them. And every mountain, and from every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. All right? So we're about to get spiritual power. Tells you in that Isaiah 59:19. So shall they fear the name of Yahweh from the west, which in the west is America, and they don't fear the Lord. If they did, they wouldn't be destroying the image of the Lord. The image of the Lord is the so-called black man. The Lord is described as a so-called black man in the Holy Scriptures. But they feel like it's okay to destroy the image of a so-called black man. All right? So they don't fear the Lord. So the Lord's going to put fear in these Edomites, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, when these death squads come in to get us, dealing with the elect of the nation of Israel, it says, when the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of Yahweh shall lift up a standard against him. And what are we going to do? We're going to be those hunters. We're going to destroy them. All right? It says, and the Redeemer shall come to Zion, Zion is dealing with the men, those elect men that are the monument of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai through prophecy and endurance. And unto them that turn from transgression in Jacob, saith Yahweh, Isaiah 14:1. The Lord shall still choose Jacob, he shall still choose Israel. And the ones that are strangers, he's going to join them to us, that are Israelites, he's going to bring them to us through this great time of violence, which is going to be known as Jacob's trouble, because they're going to make a device mandatory for buying and selling, all right? And if you don't take this device, you're not going to be able to buy or sell. If you take this device that they want to implant inside your body, you will be condemned to the destruction of America, which America will be destroyed by nuclear destruction. Verse 21, as for me, this is my covenant with them, saith Yahweh. My spirit that is upon thee, and my words which I have put in thy mouth, shall not depart out of thy mouth, nor out of the mouth of thy seed, nor out of the mouth of thy seed's seed, saith Yahweh, from henceforth and forevermore. So these red devils' plan is going to fail, all right? It's going to fail because the Lord is with the Israelite. He ain't dealing with the Edomite, all right? He allowed this devil to put us in slavery because we sinned, but he's going to destroy this Edomite. It says, behold, verse 5, behold, 2 Ezra 15, verse 5, behold, saith the Lord, I will bring plagues upon the world, the sword, which that sword is that so-called white man, famine, death, and destruction, which he's going to allow this devil to kill 2/3 of the nation of Israel because of their disobedience, as well as allow the elect to, put in some work on those 2/3 as well. For wickedness hath exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and their hurtful works are fulfilled. So the devil is running out of time. The so-called white man, he hath but a short time. Therefore, saith the Lord, I will hold my tongue no more as touching their wickedness. And that's why the prophets are on the scene, and we're putting out that information of this devil and his wickedness. It says, which they profanely commit. And the profanely means to take you out of the truth. They really want to kill the prophets to stop the name of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. But it's not going to come to pass. There's only a little bit of the elect that they're allowed to sacrifice, and that's only to fulfill the prophecy. The rest are going to become men of power, which we already have power to prophesy. It says, neither will I suffer them in those things in which they wickedly exercise themselves. So they're not going to, before they were able to kill us and get away with it, go home and laugh about it, share pictures of it, glorify themselves in it. But no more. As you saw, a lot of these Jake, they said, fuck you crackers. They're ready to get guns and blow your brains out. And that's because the Lord is putting that spirit in them to rouse them up, just like I got in Genesis 49. It says, behold, the innocent and righteous blood crieth unto me, and the souls of the just complain continually. And therefore, saith the Lord, I will surely avenge them, and receive unto me all the innocent blood from among them. Behold, my people is led as a flock to the slaughter. I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt, talking about America. But I will bring them with a mighty hand, which the Lord is going to fuck Esau up, and a stretched out arm, and smite Egypt with plagues as before, and will destroy all the land thereof. He's pretty much going to turn this place into a lake of fire. All right? Now, there's another one that came to me. Oh, yeah. Let me go to 2 Thessalonians. It says in verse 2, it says, now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord, Yahushua HaMashiach, which is a so-called black man, and by our gathering together unto him, it says that ye be not soon shaken in mind. Don't be afraid. or be troubled neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Hamashiach is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, which is that so-called white man. Perdition is destruction, all right? The so-called white American is going to be destroyed, whether it's in the famine, whether it's in, the battles that are going to take place here in the wars. All right, it says the blood's going to be up to the bridle of the horse, but even the nuclear destruction that's going to take place, all right? It says, let me jump to 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 5. It says, verse 4, so that we ourselves glory in you in the churches of Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahushai, for your patience and faith in all your persecutions and tribulations that ye endure. Right? Dealing with the saints. We glory in the brothers in our faith in Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, which is a manifest token of the righteous judgment of Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, that ye may be counted worthy of the kingdom of Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, for which ye also suffer, seeing it is a righteous thing with Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you, to get payback. It says, and to you who are troubled, rest with us, when the Lord Yahushai shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels, which his angels are described in the Holy Scriptures as angelic, so-called black men, in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, who shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of our Lord and from the glory of his power, when he shall come to be glorified in his saints, which we're in that time, and to be admired in all them that believe because of our testimony, the ones that listen and repent. Among you was believed in that day. All right? So we're in that time, and that's why they're crying about the UFOs. That's why you got articles like this. UFO reports rise to 510, not aliens, but still a threat to U.S., right? Why not aliens? Because it's so-called black men. It ain't little gray men. It ain't reptilians. It's angelic so-called black men, all right? And I say so-called because there's no such thing as a black man. There's dark brown, light brown, and then you got red. The so-called white man is not white. He is red, all right? But as you can see, these devils are afraid because the so-called UFOs, they're here, and they're going to avenge us. All right? At the commandment of Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai. It says Revelation 18, verse 8. Revelation 18, verse 8. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord Yahweh through his son Yahushai, who judgeth her. Talking about America. Now I'm going to jump down. It says, verse 17, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, meaning nothing. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? Talking about America. And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, America, wherein we were made rich, all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahushai, hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon, America, be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. Nuclear destruction is going to wipe America right off the face of the earth. Revelation 11, I'm going to read 12. It says, And they heard a great voice from heaven. Literally, we're going to hear a voice from heaven saying, Come up, saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven into what? Into a so-called UFO in a cloud. And their enemies beheld them. And the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. So FEMA makes up a map breaking America up into 10 sections. This is why it's in here like this. The 10th part of the city fell. America from west coast to east coast. From Canada down to Mexico. You know, the borders. It's going to be literally swept right off the face of the earth. America will be no more. It says, And in the earthquake from the nuclear destruction of America were slain of men 7,000. 7 just represents a complete number. All right, so men, there'll be no one here, no one left. They're all going to die in that lake of fire. And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the power of heaven. The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And we're in that time. You're going to have race wars, all right? Wars, civil wars, and you're going to have world wars, and a war in heaven. And this is the war that's going to end all wars, because the so-called white man, he's going to be put in slavery for 1,000 years and then made extinct. All right, and that's how he took peace from the earth. He made war. So once we get rid of this red devil, the earth will be able to live in peace. All praises and glory to Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai Ba'asham Ha Quadash. Double honors to our apostle elders, which rule Great Millstone well.